The first time I ever considered plastic surgery, I was 8. But it wouldn't be the last time. In fact, I've spent most of my life hating everything about myself. And this dates way back into my childhood, starting with my first crush, Franklin. Franklin was the quintessential hot boy of our block. He was the leader of our small neighborhood crew of friends, and we always hung out together. He had these delicious honey-colored eyes and beautiful brown skin and a smile that made my tummy flutter. I was smitten. One fateful evening, while hanging out with the neighborhood kids, including Franklin, at the park, the sun started to set a little early. And as the streetlights started to come on, one by one, all of our friends headed home. Latchkey kids, Franklin and I were in no rush to go home to an empty house. So we just kind of hung out and kept chatting about our favorite cartoons and wrestlers and arguing about who's better at Smash Brothers. It was me. And then I realized this was the first time we were ever alone. I mean, we hung out all the time, but usually with no less than 5 other friends. So, I couldn't believe it. And as the sun started to set even more, the fireflies came out and they were illuminating the night, dancing around us as we stared deeply into each other's eyes. This was the most romantic thing I've ever experienced in my entire 8 years of life. So as I'm preparing to embrace the first kiss that would surely blossom into a whirlwind romance, Franklin opens his mouth, but instead of a kiss, he says, "You'd be so hot if you got a nose job." Yeah. My 8-year-old heart was crushed, but mostly I was confused because up until that point, I didn't realize that other than my weight, something could be wrong with me. Growing up with a Latina mom, I was constantly being graded on my weight. You're introduced to fat shaming pretty early on in a Latin household, and greeting my mother's friends and family members at parties typically meant that it was going to be preceded with, "Oh my gosh, you lost so much weight, you look beautiful." Or, "Wow, you've really gained some pounds, you should watch out." Eventually, the heartbreak of Franklin's rejection faded, but his words that day planted a seed in my mind that grew roots deep and spread like wildfire, sparking the thought, well, what else could be wrong with me? According to magazines, TV, and music videos, apparently a lot. And at 8, I became obsessed with doing whatever I could to become a version of myself that would receive less judgment and shame. So, I started stealing my mom's makeup to practice making up for what God didn't give me. Bronzer skin, fuller lips, rosier cheeks. I also started noticing the type of attention the older girls were getting in the neighborhood from the other boys and wanted to emulate them. So, I tried to dress a little bit more grown up. I tried to emulate the bodies of my peers who developed faster than I did by stuffing my bra. At 12 years old, I fried my hair with relaxer, trying to tame my curls into the perfectly pinned straight hair that graced all the Teen Vogue covers in the 90s. None of this worked, by the way, spoiler alert. I ended up hating myself more because none of it really worked. And this led to me going into high school, developing an eating disturbance, and just drowning in self-loathing. In my early adulthood, I became convinced that the only way to get attention was to use my sexuality because that was truly what I believed was my only social currency. And I leapfrogged from relationship to relationship and bed to bed, desperately praying to find a love that would hopefully help me learn to love myself. But it never happened. And then the universe intervened. I was 24. I'm driving on 270. I'm on my way to work. And I get cut off short by a yellow Corvette, no turn signal. And I panic and I slam in the brakes, trying to avoid hitting this luxury vehicle that I truly can't afford to hit. And instead, I hit this cement median head on going 65. All 5 of the airbags in my car failed to deploy, and I'm propelled forward, nose brakes on the dashboard, blood spewing everywhere, Kill Bill style. And soon, emergency vehicles arrive on the scene. They use the jaws of life to get me out of my car. As the EMTs are pulling my bloody and bruised body out of the car, I overhear one of them say to the other, "Is her nose really that big, or is it just broken?" And through the haze of pain and blood and just, chaos, I yell, "It's because it's broken." So I'm at the ER, and my brother, shows up right away, and he's trying to lift my spirits and, using his comedic talents to draw comparisons between me and a sad koala bear with my freshly blackened eyes and a nose that has now swollen up to the majority of my face. My dad arrives soon after, and I immediately prepare for how angry he's going to be because I know that my car is totaled and he's going to be pissed. But instead, he says, "Don't worry, we're going to buy you a new car and a new nose." Being half Persian, it's almost like a rite of passage to get a nose job into womanhood, right? And for a while, I highly considered it. But shortly after, I received a letter in the mail, a recall letter, for the make and model of my vehicle. And apparently, there was a defect with the airbags where upon deployment, they were shooting metal shards into people's faces, maiming and killing them. Okay, universe, I hear you. I'm gonna be happy with what I have. And, being faced with this near-death experience, I decided right then and there, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life hating myself. Life is too long to go through life that way. And it was truly exhausting to try and be and look what everybody wanted me to be and look like. I would never be that. I'm always too big or too small in some areas, and it's just not worth it. It's not. I recently celebrated my 30th birthday in Bali with the love of my life, and for the first time, I wore a bikini on the beach in public in my adult life. And I felt beautiful and in love, and we are surrounded by Instagram models and celebrities as far as the eye can see who make this annual pilgrimage to get cheap lipo and lip fillers, kind of like an eat, pray, tuck, if you will. And I couldn't care about any of that because finally, I truly feel in love with myself. Thank you.